All right, welcome back to Burt's Basics. My name is Peter Burt. I teach at Box Elder High School, and today we are covering the small intestine. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So here's what we need to know. Now, these names, I'm telling you, the only way you're going to memorize these names is if you start pronouncing them more and more and more and more. They're called the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So let's go ahead and talk about the small intestine, what its purpose is, why we care about it, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So let's start with our basics. Remember, we have in my stomach, and if you watch the other videos, we have chyme. Chyme is a liquid juice of the food that we did eat. Now, the pH of this is really wicked. It's very, very acidic. It's 1 to 3. So it's depending on what you eat. Obviously, if you drink a lot of water, it'll be less or higher, I guess. But it's going to go through the gatekeeper valve into my small intestine. Okay, the main job of the small intestine is absorption, 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 absorption. And they're divided into 3 parts. So let's start with duodenum. Okay, duodenum literally means 12 fingers. So the duodenum in most books should be between 12 inches to 14 inches. It should be about a foot. Now, the reason why the duodenum is so important, if you remember the last video, is the duodenum is this part in yellow. So maybe I'll switch to yellow. Okay, yellow. So he's not going to absorb very much in this first foot, but what you do need to know is you have this guy, your liver, and you have this guy behind the stomach, my pancreas, secreting all of their juices into the duodenum. So if you ever get any test questions about the duodenum, it's probably going to be something like that. You do need to know that the duodenum is where all the pancreas and all the liver secrete their intestinal juices too. So you got to know the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine, and that's where all the digestional juices go in. Okay, and it's about a foot. We'll say a foot just to make our life easier. Okay, the jejunum is about 8 feet. Okay, I'm going to age myself here, see if anyone knows what I'm doing. Whenever I think of jejunum, I always say jejunum. Does anyone know what that is? Jejunum. That's a chia pet. Okay, this is your jejunum here. Now, there's not really a good dividing line between the jejunum and duodenum. Okay, so I mean, if you're thinking there's like a big ridge change here, there's not. The jejunum is where most of the nutrients get absorbed. Okay, that could be a test question right there. So next time you guys eat a burger, you look at that burger and you say, oh, jejunum, here you go, baby. Okay, make sure you guys get the jejunum. Now, the ileum can absorb as well. He's roughly about 12 feet on average, so maybe 10 to 12. The average book says our small intestine is 20 feet. I'm never going to do numbers because they vary so wildly. I'm going to leave those alone. But I am going to go in order: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Now, you might be like, hey, we've already done ileum. You really haven't, because there's ileum with an E, and then there's ileum with an I. Ileum with the I are these bones. That's your ileum, that's your ileum, that's your iliac crest of your pelvis, okay? So ileum with an I is the bone, ileum with the E is the small intestine. Now, he will absorb a ton, but he's the one, ileum, who connects to the large intestine. Okay, so the ileum is the last part of your small intestine to get there. So now the reason why we care about small intestine is because of this. If I could zoom in on small intestine, this is what they look like, okay? And they're called villi, okay? Villi help increase surface area. If you ever want to get really good at science, you need to master surface area. I'm not kidding. Everyone always thinks intestines were flat, okay? If intestines are flat and this is food trying to get absorbed on the intestinal wall, right? What about this food particle right here? He can't even touch the intestine, so he would go straight through. And what happens if he gets into the large intestine? Well, the large intestine, as soon as we jump to here, we're going to call this feces, which is a fancy word for poo. So you understand, we don't want this guy to travel all the way through without ever touching the intestinal wall. So instead of the intestines being flat, they're highly folded. Now think about this for a second. Why would that matter? Let's get my pen back. Why would that matter? Maybe, there we go, if it's highly folded. Well, if it's highly folded, now let's say food's in red. What happens if this is all covered with food? Well, then the food can go over and fall in the next crevice, and then the next crevice, and then the next crevice, and then the next crevice. Do you see how much more area there is to the surface to absorb food? And that's what villi are all about. Villi increase the surface area. So if I look at my intestines, they have all these villi to help with all these nutrients to give you more room to absorb. And that's why they are the king of absorption. Okay. Now, you don't need to know this diagram, so don't freak out too bad, but I just wanted to show you. This is my small intestine side. Okay, this is the lumen. Okay. And then over here, you have your cells in your blood, okay? So you can kind of see what we're trying to do. By this time, protein should have been broken apart into amino acids. And then I absorb amino acids. By this time, starch and all these big sugars should be broken down to monosaccharides, which then I will absorb them. You should recognize this guy, okay? I always drew him like this. Do you remember how we drew this as a triglyceride? This is a fat, right? And so by this time, we should be able to take the fat and we should have emulsified it and lipased it to smaller pieces, and then we can absorb the fats. So the whole point is we have been digesting for so long, it's finally time to absorb, 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 with a side of absorption. Now to do that, the small intestine uses a really cool technique. All right. Now, this is going to be a little tricky, but you guys are so talented, you guys can do this. You already know what peristalsis is. Peristalsis is smooth muscular contractions to propel the food down the tract. So as soon as you swallow and the bolus gets in your esophagus, these muscles are going to contract and they're going to push it down. The best way to explain this is like a snake. If you've ever seen a snake eat a mouse or a rat, you can kind of see it. So this is going to contract. In the small intestine, we have something called segmentation. Now, this is highly specific to small intestine. Okay, peristalsis occurs everywhere, so all places, right? But this one's highly unique. So let's go ahead and talk about this chyme. So here I have some chyme, right? Remember, there's still muscles around your small intestines as well. So what do they do with this chyme right here? This is kind of weird to think about, but what they do is they pinch in the middle. So all of a sudden, this muscle pinches, and this muscle pinches. Now, if you look at this, you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense, because some stuff will go forward and some stuff will go backwards. And that's exactly what segmentation is. It's like a washing machine. They're shoving the chyme forward and backwards and forward and backwards. Now, don't get me wrong, peristalsis is a single direction. That's the worst arrow I have ever drawn. So let's go ahead and redraw that. Okay, peristalsis is a fancy way of pushing the food along the track, okay? That's what peristalsis does. Where segmentation is more of a mixing effect to have maximum absorption rates, because I need those amino acids. I need that glucose, okay? I need the fat. I need the triglyceride. I need all of this stuff. So segmentation allows the food, I hate the word food, chyme, to kind of have more contact with my almighty villi. Do you see how cool this is? So what if the substance went forward, and then segmentation made it go backwards, and then segmentation made it go forward, and then segmentation made it go backwards? Eventually, peristalsis is going to make it all go this way. But this is why segmentation is so cool. It maximum absorbs. That's why these villi are so crucial. Those villi help in absorbing, which then goes to the last concept we got to talk about. Celiac disease. You've probably heard of celiac disease before. Just look at the picture, normal, celiac, and now you tell me, what happens in celiac disease? Well, for some reason, when we eat a product, it takes our villi and it destroys them. Now, if it destroys them, then I could have a lot of symptoms like bloating, diarrhea, maybe bad absorption, right? Maybe absorption goes down, okay? I don't know. All these things happen. So the question is, what do we eat in celiac disease that destroys the villi of my intestines? And it does flare up. The magic word, which if you guys don't know by now, you should know very well, is this. It's gluten. Now, most of you might not know what gluten is, but if you wonder what gluten is, it's just a protein. It's just a simple protein, but it's found in almost everything. It's found in wheat, it's found in barley, it's found in rye, okay? And it causes lots of problems, bloating, gas, fatigue. It can even lead to like big things like anemia and osteoporosis and it's hard. So far, we've only found one way to combat this celiac disease, and it is to not eat gluten. It's kind of an allergic reaction to gluten. So guess what? If you don't eat gluten, then you won't have those flare-ups. And in today's world, gluten-free menus are on the rise. Okay? Congratulations, you have now finished the small intestine. So by the time I get to my ileum, remember with an E, I have absorbed all the nutrients I want, and now I'm ready to bypass and jump to the next organ, which is my large intestine. Okay, once we get into my large intestine, remember, that's where we're going to call it feces, and that's where we'll start our next video. Thanks for watching Burt's Basics. See you on the flip side.